And so we're always actually moving through change. It's about identifying how our decisions are moving us closer or further away from the positive evolution that we're looking to do.
Welcome to The Shift, where we search for ways to do better by thinking better.
Whether you're going through a major life change, looking to deepen your understanding of yourself, or hoping to improve your relationships with others, The Shift is here for you.
We're your hosts, Isla and Yashar, an endlessly curious sister and brother team.
As certified brain-based executive coaches with backgrounds in medicine and management, we combine the neurosciences, performance psychology, strategic planning methodology, and mindfulness techniques to empower your transformation from the inside out.
Join us in conversation as we explore better ways to show up for ourselves and each other. Hi, friends. Welcome back to The Shift. Today, we are looking at the art of becoming, specifically through the lens of mind shifting, the concept of change, and bringing it to embracing evolution and what that means to shift from change to evolution. So we all know transformation is uncomfortable AF, but we also know that we're actually hardwired to evolve, and change is the only constant. And so we want to offer tools today on how to embrace that, to optimize it, as it were, but really to lean in to your own art of becoming and making room and giving yourself a permission slip, really, to become whoever you're meant to be in that moment. One of my favorite quotes around this subject is a Max Dupree quote that says, "We cannot become what we need to be by remaining what we are." And I lean into that a lot when I'm in a moment of transition, knowing that a transformation is in bloom and making the decisions on the parts I want to keep and take with me and the parts that it's time to let go. Yashar, what's your relationship with change, or in this case, what we're talking about, evolution?
For me, it's easy to get bogged down, maybe like many people, with the details and the friction and the frustration of something not going the way I want it to go, asking of me to become a version of me that I have yet to develop a strong relationship with, or simply I just think it's not the right thing for me. And so when I'm stuck in this kind of area of friction and it feels like a change that I don't want to do, and I try to mind shift it and think about it as an evolutionary positive, then I have to slow down and ask of myself, how is this making me better? How is this adding value to my life? And as hard as this is, as much as I maybe don't even want to wrestle with this idea or concept or challenge in front of me, if I change the lens into how does this make me grow as a human, brings me closer to my value propositions, to the things that I want to have more of in my life, then even though it's hard, I have a lens in which I can get behind, I can get almost even excited by some areas of it to do the work necessary. And as you said off the top, Isla, change is the only constant. So we just kind of allow ourselves to believe that things aren't changing, but every decision we make has a ripple effect. And so, as we say, whether you do or you don't, you're still making a choice. And that choice moves you closer or further away from the version of yourself that you want to be, from the relationships you want to have, for the impact you want to create within the family systems, the businesses, the communities, the world that you want to live in. And so we're always actually moving through change. It's about identifying how our decisions are moving us closer or further away from the positive evolution that we're looking to do. And so in this conversation with you, I'm excited to talk about how to bring tools into the icky sticky, how to bring tools into the moments of challenge, and how to mind shift this idea of change is hard only, and move it towards change can be challenging, yet it's a positive evolution if we can see it as such.
And working with clients, what do you see when someone is a little bit change averse? Like, what are some of the ways people can identify it in their lives, in their bodies?
From a symptomology standpoint, from like a mental emotional standpoint, what most people see within their own being, within their own lives, is there's this feeling of stagnation or the stuckness, this idea of like, I know something isn't right, but I kind of stuck in this quicksand. And that can look like resentment. That can look like a lot more jealousy coming up. That can look like some anger, fear, anxiety, depression, confusion, often, very much often, lack of motivation, and a general sense of unfulfillment. And I think a big part of that also is the unfulfillment and all the other things I mentioned. The root of all of that really is from a place of identity of who am I, what am I about, and how again am I adding positive evolution into my life. And when we're stuck with the unknown and the uncertainty of that question, that's when we start to become stuck in some of these emotions that can repeat and not be resolved the way we want them to resolve. But also, what I've noticed with the clients we worked with is once they hit a stride, once they hit this acceptance that change can be positive and new identity pieces can bloom, there's actually a level of what I say, welcome back home. There's this level of like sitting in the pocket, sitting in a flow of themselves, sitting in a comfort actually of, oh yeah, this is who I can be and who I want to be. And then the work again becomes motivating to move towards that and actually bring that into life. So when you learn the process of re-identifying with understanding how to work through these emotions, with understanding how to redefine who you are, what you're about, and what that identity is, that's when the positive evolution happens. And that's where the magic begins.
I love this concept of homecoming. We talk about it a lot. We talk about it with our clients. It kind of grounds us in how we approach this work together, in the sense that we're always trying to give you the tools to bring you back to yourself, your truest self in that moment. We call it your best leader. You can call it your best self. It's all the same. It's the highest version of you that is leading you from a place grounded in your values. But this is not a static space and time, actually. And homecoming is not a destination. And I think sometimes people get trapped in this idea that there will be an arrival point, and then the frustration stems from that. Like, I did all this work, why am I not there? And I think that's where the mind shift begins, truthfully, is understanding that homecoming is a continuous journey. At any given time of your life, you will need a different version of you. You will meet a different version of you. You will birth a different version of you. And really, we hope to give you the tools to meet that person, that version, with that same openness and grace and possibility that you would all your other versions. A concept that I brought up at the beginning of this conversation today was this idea of a permission slip. Now, anyone who's worked with us knows that this is kind of the first thing we give you. When you start working with us, I'm like, here is your permission slip. You are allowed to change. We invite you to evolve. And what that means is part of that means you get to change your mind. You get to change your mind on the things you thought served you and then learn that no longer do. You get to change your mind on what you thought your values are and then you find ones that are more aligned. You get to change your mind. And part of that is because I deep down believe that your ideals of yesterday shouldn't weigh down to your tomorrow. And that doesn't mean that yesterday they weren't true. It just means that they may not be true tomorrow. So who you wanted to be isn't as important as who you currently are and who you're currently becoming. And who you decide to show up right now isn't an indication of who you will decide to show up with as, 10 years from now. And I think this is where some people have a little discomfort and disease because, again, there's so much uncertainty. But we don't need to go in all those different directions. What we actually ask you to do is stay present in today and build those self awareness muscles and those personal accountability muscles to today, and let you decide today what serves you and give you the permission slip to let go of the things that no longer do. And this is not a concept of failure. This is evolution in and of itself. Like the decisions I made at 28 with my full heart and full passion, she was allowed to decide that and believe that and want that and live that life. And at 40, when I had to make a different decision, very difficult, she also was allowed to make that. My 28-year-old self wasn't responsible for predicting what my 40-year-old self needed. And my 40-year-old self wasn't responsible for living with the choices my 28-year-old self made. This is what I'm talking about. Understanding how to be honest with yourself, present with yourself, and holding on to the version of you that no longer is aligned is not part of that. That's where all the stagnation and the resentment and all the other stuff Yasha listed come up, is because we're not being truthful and honest with what we actually need and how we are meant to realign, align, and realign and reframe and unlearn and relearn to stay in our power. And that only comes from that self awareness that we can possess, that openness to access a part of us that we are probably new to discover. But with that openness to lean into what could be the possibility of what may feel good right now, that's where the evolution happens. And then you meet the versions of yourself that each time that you are more proud of, more aligned with, more in flow with, you get to stretch and expand in directions that you wouldn't have if you didn't take the risk to lean into your evolution.
An important point to be made here from my vantage point is that it doesn't necessarily have to be big life altering changes. Sometimes, yes, that is the case. Often, though, the micro nuance day to day examples are more prevalent than these big chapters or bookends of our lives. And so I just want to put a little point out that my words, my best leader words, haven't changed in maybe almost 10 years now.
That's true. Mine
Yeah,
change all the time.
right. And yours change all the time. However, the definition of each of my words within my best leaders have become more clear, have become different, and have become more focused on the value structures of my life currently, again, as a, in my early 40s versus in my early 30s. And so to your point again, I don't have to say, well, when I first picked these words, this is how I saw myself. So I'm just shooting for that same kind of version. What I'm saying is these words are still incredibly valuable, present, and meaningful to me. And because of the environments, because of the relationships, because of the knowledge that I've gained throughout these years, this is how these words serve me differently and how they point me and focus me into the direction of who I want to be in the life I'm trying to create. And there's so many elements to that, that going back to the idea of what you said of permission slip, that it took me a while to understand this nuanced version where I don't have to make wholesale changes. I can make these micro changes that the delta, the difference may seem minor, but over years and time, it actually starts to create a different version of me. It creates a different connection point with how I show up to this world. When I feel like those words are no longer serving me, I like to sit back and do our exercise again and do the meditation and the visualization again to really see, is it the words that aren't serving me? Or is it my application of those words that are no longer serving me? And thus far, it's been the application. I was stuck in an old definition. And so when I
Right.
upgrade the definition, I actually feel much more, put into my place, put into where I want to be, and I can flow into life in a stronger way. So I think that's really important to talk about when we express what change and evolution looks like, because again, the mind can go to these big events in our lives, which is incredibly true for all of us in our own ways. And also, like I said, it's the micro nuance day to day and the understanding the connection with who it is and how it is that we're showing up that make big differences as well.
Hi, friends. Sorry for the quick interruption, but we really wanted you to be the first to know that on January 31st, we are releasing a free training entitled How to Work Better Together. If teamwork makes the dream work, how do you make the team work? We hope to provide you with strategies to optimize and leverage your team's best performance, lead you through conflict and challenge, build trust and accountability, and of course, as always, prioritize inclusion and mental health. The strategies that we're going to provide you will foster creativity and innovation, and you will leave the training with a personalized leadership strategy that you can apply right away. This training is ideal for small businesses, family businesses, entrepreneurs, or really individuals looking to upgrade their leadership skills and styles. So yes, we will shift the way you lead, but more importantly, we will shift the way you work together. You can get early access by signing up in the show notes below. We look forward to seeing how this training will optimize your team's collaboration, harmony, and performance. Now back to the conversation. I love that as an example of you bringing up your best leader words and how they've remained the same since we've started this work together, but that the definition and the nuance of the meaning changes. Because I think that gives such an interesting example because I always assume that words will change because mine do, but it's so good to see how other people work with these words and how it works for you. And so for me, every given year or maybe even 6 months, sometimes my actual words will change. Like I ask, what's a more precise word of the thing that I need right now? Or what do I need to push myself in this moment in time? So that's how I use my words, where it's like, okay, in this season, you need this word to kind of push you outside your comfort zone a little bit, stretch a little bit, because for me, they provide an anchor. So I know in each season what is my work.
And exactly. And then again, for me, it's the redefining
Yeah.
of those words. And it's just again working to get closer to the version of ourselves that we want to be in the challenge that is change.
Do our listeners know your words, Yash?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. It has been brought up in previous episodes. We have talked about it, but maybe more importantly, we should remind everyone that there's a free link to the leadership code, which is an exercise where you can figure out your leadership code, your authentic leadership style, and your leadership words so that you could do the work that we're talking about here. However, my words are grounded, loving, warrior. Those are my three words. And in no point in my life have I felt like grounded, loving, and warrior as words have not served me for my highest good to where I want to go. Like I said again, for the third time, perhaps in this conversation, I've redefined what those three words mean for me. So they're more clearly stated for the type of life and relationships with myself and others that I'm trying to lead. So at this point, Isla, let's get into some of the tools. Let's get in some of the tangibles of what change versus evolution can look like so that mind shifts can begin.
So today we're going to offer 3 tools to explore to help you embrace evolution versus just looking at change as something that has to happen, redefining it in the purpose of evolution, and then facilitating that evolution with some tools to ease that transition. So, the 3 tools we're going to offer today are gratitude, grit, and grace. And we hope that these will facilitate your evolution with ease. Yasha, you want to get us started with gratitude?
Sure. So we have a whole conversation, a whole episode 13 on gratitude. So I would highly suggest even if you think you have a relationship with gratitude, head over to that episode after you listen to this one, because we really do try to mind shift what gratitude is and how to practice it and how to supercharge that exercise so that your brain is actually activated in a specific way when you are practicing gratitude. For this conversation, I would say that gratitude is paying attention to your life and the occurrences in your life in a very specific way. It's about how you see and how you appreciate what's happening in your life, even in the midst of struggle and even in the midst of challenge. If you're able to choose to see a growth opportunity, an evolutionary point, an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to connect deeper to yourself and others in the midst of your day to day. And again, as I said, in the midst of a challenge, then you are absolutely pulling and strengthening on your gratitude muscles. It is foundational. If we want any sort of positive change to be made in our lives, we have to start by paying attention to what is going well, what is an opportunity for betterment, and then grow from there. It's almost impossible to sustainably and positively move forward in our lives in a way that we will be proud of ourselves and the things that we're accomplishing if we can't start by having gratitude for what already exists in our lives today. And many times when we do gratitude work with people, they look for the big, they look for the very big and the extraordinary, which if you can find those things, virtual high fives to all of you, virtual hugs. I'm so happy you can do that. And I would say caution around this. Look for the everyday occurrences that can spark excitement, joy, happiness, fulfillment, connection, like someone opening the door for you, someone holding the elevator door before it shuts on you, getting an extra couple of green lights on your way out somewhere. The smile your child, your friend, your neighbor, your dog gives you. Look for the pieces that reconnect you, that are not the big. We're not all going to have the big, but we do all have the moments, the tiny, tiny, tiny moments that, if we pay attention to in a specific way, add up and build a lot of currency and a lot of positive emotional currency in our lives. So that's where I would start. Start with gratitude. Again, if you don't have a very good relationship with it, head over to episode 13 to learn more about what that looks like. And so a very simple question to ask yourself to incorporate this tool is, how can you incorporate gratitude into your daily life?
Another way that for me, especially in moments of transition and evolution and in the midst of all this change, when I look at gratitude, I also lean into the concept of possibility. That is what gratitude usually is for me in those moments where I am looking for hope. So, that again is probably another episode that will help strengthen this conversation, is our episode 14 on hope, because when in the midst of uncertainty, gratitude looks like possibility. And what is possibility if not hope? And so, if that is something you are struggling with, as Yasha said, as you are transitioning, as you're evolving, as you're trying to figure out who you are and what your current version of you needs, those are great episodes to start with, to lean into the assets. Really, it's an asset mapping you're doing of your life and of the potential of where you could grow. And that is really building new inventory in your brain to prepare you to go to places that maybe you have yet to go. So, to be able to do that, another thing you're going to need is grit. It's definitely a tool necessary. So, now that you've filled your backpack and your soul with all this gratitude, the next thing you're going to need is grit. Tell us about grit, Yash.
Yes, interestingly enough, grit can often be people's comfort zone, because we are told to suck it up, buttercup, pull up your socks. We're trained to hustle and to grind and to fight through it.
It's true because, we work primarily with high performers. And so this seems to be where they're like, yeah, this part I got. And it's the other softer skills that we have to work on. Um, but I think the mind shift of grit, which you're going to provide us, provides a nuance to this conversation.
The nuance I want to give is, how do we find grit when we're faced with conflict and challenge? How do we find the tool or the gear within our minds and our hearts to be able to show up when we feel there's judgment within ourselves or within others? And again, I'm going to refer to a episode that we did on conflict, where we speak about conflict as an invitation for evolution, as an opportunity for betterment and for growth. And that's episode number 4. That conversation goes deep into the idea of what conflict can look like. For here in this conversation, I want to just simply say, grit is necessary when we feel there's judgment coming up, when we feel like we're not doing well, when we feel like we're behind the 8 ball and we want to do better. And what I would suggest is, if we take a moment and look at that situation where these emotions come up, when the stagnation and resentment comes up, and we take responsibility for how we are showing up to the challenge, and we dive deeper into the way we want to connect to the challenge, we will often be pleasantly surprised by the benefits that can come to ourselves directly because of this challenge. And so the nuanced conversation around grit is this: that when it's hard and we're feeling crummy, how do we pull on our mindset muscles to see the opportunity for betterment, and then to step into it as a version of ourselves that we are excited by, so then we can be pleasantly surprised by the growth that is witnessed. This is a part where many people can skip over. So Isla, let's get into it a little bit more carefully.
Yeah, I think the nuance of how we are discussing grit really have to do with a commitment to your values. So we're not just talking about sheer force here. You know, yes, it will require strength. It will require you to pull from parts of yourself that need you to show up for yourself. But we're not saying strength for strength's sake. We're saying a deep alignment with the whole point and purpose of why you're doing it in the first place. And when adversity comes in those moments and you still have to show up, that's the tools we're talking about. Like speaking out about things that are aligned with your values that may create conflict within your personal relationships. In those moments, it requires a version of grit that maybe in other times you didn't have to access, which is I commit to my values. I commit to my standards. I commit to the version of myself and the world that I want to see. And therefore, even if it feels lonely and scary and hard, I will show up anyways. That's the grit we're talking about today.
And so, what do you think a couple of mind shift questions could be to help people ground this in their daily lives?
I feel like on this episode, we're giving you a lot of homework because the answer to that is going to be first figuring out who your best self, your best leader is. And that requires you to do, some reflection with yourself to come up with those words. Again, as Yashar mentioned before, we have the leadership code. It's free. That can help you as well. Find those words for yourself. But really, it starts with understanding or whatever your core values are and your personal why, because that will inform what grit looks like for you. Because the version before you do that inner work is going to be, for lack of a better word, superficial, in the sense it's going to be informed by past narratives, past events, past patterning behaviors that has told you that this is what tough looks like. This is what grit looks like. And while we respect that version of you, and they served a purpose for your parts to show up at different times in your life, and they were there for you. And so I want to honor that version of you, but I also want to challenge us, because we are talking about evolution. That version of you may or may not serve you today. And so it requires first a realignment with what are your core values today? Like, what is your purpose? What is your why? What is it that you're trying to do here? And then that version of you will inform how to empower your grit. That version of you will inform what even grit looks like. And like all of the ways we work together, that is not something I can answer for you. That's not something Yashar can answer for you. No book, no nothing. The only person that can actually answer these questions is you. And the version of you that should be answering those questions is the version of you that is coming into alignment with the best parts of you that are here today, the parts that want to grow, the parts that are curious to change, the parts that are leaning into possibility. That's the version that we want to be answering these questions. So we gave you a lot of episodes to listen to so far already. But we have referenced, the leadership code a bunch of times because it is a tool we offer. But if you have another tool, lean in there. If you have a meditation practice, if you have visualization practice, wherever it is you go to get in touch with yourself, on a walk, hike up the mountain, do that first before you answer these questions, so that you're answering it from a place of the person that you are evolving into.
I want to quickly share a story that I think can illustrate how our best leader words, our best self words, our leadership code can come into play, even in challenge and conflict when we want to use grit. I was working with an artist. One of her words was creativity. She had a very personal and deep connection to this word because of the art that she produced. And it felt like a natural piece for her. However, many sessions later, a big challenge came up in her life and she was really struggling through this, and she needed to show grit in this scenario. And she was struggling with using one of her best leader words, which was creativity. And I asked her, why does she value this word so much? And she said, because it gives me the opportunity to see different perspective, use different mediums, take different examples around my life and put them together in ways that maybe other people wouldn't think of. I said, perfect. How in this situation, in this conflict, can you take a different perspective, see different angles, have different opinions that maybe other people haven't looked at, including yourself? Just that one simple reframe from an artistic medium to an everyday conflict challenge scenario gave her a big aha and insight, where not only did she want to step into her grit because now she's grounded in who she is and how she is as a human being, but it made her motivated to solve the challenge that was ahead of her. And before this conversation, it's been a couple of weeks where she just sat on this conflict and didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. And so this is the power of taking the best of who you are. I didn't answer anything for her. She, in fact, came up with the game plan. but it's taking the best of who you are and applying it in different scenarios in different ways, but the foundation remains the same. And from there, you build more of an inventory, more of an understanding, and more personal confidence and strength to be able to handle all the various things that come up in your life. And this is a great example, I think, of how grit can be used.
Absolutely. And it personifies the idea of making these words work for you. That's why you're the creator of these words. We don't pick them, you do. And then you make them work for you, you know? And this is a great example of that. That's why it's so important that they have to really be aligned with the version of you that you are becoming in this current moment.
Absolutely. So let's get to the third tool here, which is grace.
Mhm.
And we have yet to do a episode on grace and the meaning of grace, so we can't reference you to that.
Not yet.
Not yet, but there will be one coming up for sure, because underneath grace, the foundation of grace is self-compassion. And we absolutely take seriously the science that grounds self-compassion, and something we can talk about in a later episode, as I said. But Isla, why don't you work us through grace and how this can be used in the situation of positive evolutionary growth?
I think this is a tool that is so critical to evolution and change and transition that sometimes gets overlooked because, again, for most, the tough is easiest. The hard, you know, the idea of strength, this concept of watching yourself climb up a mountain. But to do that stuff, you need to make space for grace. Grace looks like love, unconditional love for yourself, which is self compassion. Grace sees transition as invitation. It makes room for forgiveness. It gives you permission to not know. It gives you permission to be lost. It gives you permission to need space and ask for help. Grace is about empathy, it's about self care, it's embracing this unknown with a trust, a deep inner trust that you will ultimately find your way. Grace really also empowers our intuition and invites a deeper type of wisdom to arise here. Sometimes accessing this space is as simple as breath work or meditation, journaling, the gratitude work we were talking about. But other times it needs deeper conversations, it needs safer spaces for support. It might require you to lean into the parts of yourself that are a little weaker, you know, asking for help, giving yourself time, staying in the unknown for a little bit longer. Ultimately, we know that transformation is hard, and all of the mental, emotional muscles you will have to birth and rebirth as you bring better versions of yourself into this world. For that to happen, you need to feed yourself with grace, with this unconditional love, with this self compassion, with this space to not know, and the trust that you will figure it out. When we are looking at grace and you've realigned and aligned with your core words, your values, and your purpose in this current moment, ask that version of you what it needs. Ask that version of you how you can embrace grace to help you through these times of evolution and change. Ask this version of you what will support you from yourself to yourself, what will support you, that you will ask your community, knowing that you're ultimately on the path of becoming. What does grace look like?
And the one tool that I find very useful in working with individuals who struggle with self-compassion, who struggle with grace, who struggle with these conversations, that's 100% of the people we work with, including ourselves sometimes. So you're in good company. The one question is, how would you speak to someone you love dearly? Think of a child, think of a grandparent, think of a best friend, think of, again, your animals that you take such good care of. If you're able to identify how you speak to them as the best version of you, how you support them in times of challenge, how you invite them into their pain and hold space for them when you're at your best, then those are great insights to how you can start doing the same for yourself. I didn't say it will be the same, because you're probably not able to maybe at the same level, because learning self-compassion takes time and we're more outwardly and externally focused with these muscles. But what I am saying is those are clues that will lead you back into yourself and how you can address yourself with self-compassion, with grace, so that you can show up to times of challenge in a way that, again, you would make yourself more proud.
This work takes superpowers that you have. It takes self-awareness that you can possess. It takes openness that you can access, openness to be wrong, openness to be right, openness to see what evolves. In times of transition and transformation, don't see it all as change for change's sake. Take a moment and ground yourself in the why it's even happening and what is it that you want to become. That reframe allows you to see these moments as evolution and decide with eyes wide open what it is that you want to evolve towards. We hope the tools today gave you ways to not only reconceptualize evolution, but also optimize your becoming. Thank you for listening, friends. What shifted for you during this episode? We'd love to hear your insights. Write us with any questions, commentary, or episode ideas at theshift@mindshiftleadership.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, we would deeply appreciate a like and subscribe.
The Shift is brought to you by Mindshift Leadership, a heart-centered, evidence-based, mindset-powered leadership company, empowering you with the training to prioritize mental health, inclusion, and performance optimization.